Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 38 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans.
Hello, everybody. I know it's been a bit of a hiatus since we last did a podcast. I had to kind of get some things settled out in Los Angeles, and Dad over here has been busy with his stuff back in Michigan. But I've been home for the holidays for the past week and a half or so, and we thought that we couldn't miss this opportunity to do a podcast while we're together in person. So we're going to try to get the College Football Throwdown podcast started back up, going on a bi-weekly, maybe just monthly, during the off season, as we sort of cover specifically, the details of Nebraska, but also any sort of big, larger college football news within the wider sphere of everything. And I'm sure we'll do a podcast maybe after the championship game at some point. Yeah, that's the plan. For those of you who are listening for the first time, College Football Throwdown is a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. Specifically, we're a duo, father-son duo, who like to do this, talk about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, but also wider college football talk as well. And that's what we'll be diving into today. The Nebraska-Tennessee bowl game, as well as the first two playoff games and the implications that has for the Alabama-Clemson national championship game that will begin next week. All right. So first things first, we got to talk about that Music City Bowl, don't we?
Yes, we do. Regretfully, the outcome was not what we desired here as Husker fans, and frankly, there were some undesirable things that were exposed, let's say, during that. And so, there's just a reality that we have to face about where we are as a program and where we might move forward from here to make sure that we're doing the things we need to do to be even better next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and with the Tennessee game, we knew we were going to struggle since three of our best players are basically out, with our quarterback, Tommy Armstrong, our best wide receiver, Jordan Westerkamp, and then our best defensive player, Nathan Gary, all out with injuries, and we had a couple more injuries over the course of the game.
Right.
So we were severely hampered going in, but we still had a chance, certainly.
Yeah.
If Tennessee made some mistakes, but to their credit, they played a pretty solid game.
They played clean from the standpoint of turnovers and penalties. However, they certainly gifted us opportunities by missing some opportunities that were golden for them, and they weren't able to complete the deal, whether it was a dropped pass or maybe a couple of missed running plays that could have gone a lot further. So they were a team that clearly had superior athletes to us in many of the positions on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a lot of dropped passes or overthrown passes, but we got lucky on. And sometimes we were able to capitalize on those, and then sometimes we weren't. The frustrating thing, as I told you, was that there were parts of the game where our offense would get going and we'd have some momentum and we'd go down there and score a touchdown. Our defense would play pretty good, and stopping Tennessee's offense and giving us the chance to, have these drives. But then it seemed like every time we scored a touchdown, they were able to respond right away. And so it kept us from building that momentum. It always got stunted, and so we were always playing from behind the whole game.
That is correct. And that has been a little bit of an undesirable thing that we've witnessed here late in the season, pretty much from the Ohio State loss on, that our defensive performance seemed to take a step back. And I don't know really any specific one thing that said this is the reason why our defense was performing less effectively than it was before, other than the fact that you were playing teams that were better, that they were just of higher caliber than maybe some of the teams we were playing earlier in the season, so we were able to expose some things. But that's definitely something that you hope that the coaching staff's able to address in the off season, is things like tackling, for example, during the Motor City Bowl was really bad, and
Yeah.
and it's the kind of basic stuff that at that point in the season you shouldn't be having, and yet there were an awful lot of players who were just kind of lunging at the Tennessee players rather than trying to wrap them up. And after a spring practice in which they were emphasizing this whole rugby style tackling activity, which is about basically wrestling a guy to the ground, right, wrapping them up and pulling them down rather than hitting through them. We didn't see that in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I have seen a lot of that, like just watching some of the bowl games and even some of these NFL games where a player might tackle a guy and only grab onto his foot, but he holds onto his foot and long enough for one of his buddies to come over and finish the job, kind of thing.
Right.
So I think that has become a more popular philosophy.
Absolutely, and it's something that we're going to have to improve on. Now, the good news for Nebraska as we look at that at the future is I think we've got some youth in some spots on defense, and those guys should be able to emerge with better skills, more practiced, more polished, if you will, than where we saw them in this bowl game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another positive thing I'll say is that you and I were both worried that this could be a blowout game, a la the Ohio State game where we just are completely inept. And it wasn't that. We stayed competitive, at least within a reasonable scoring distance of them, and forced them to keep scoring points if they wanted to stay ahead, that sort of thing.
Right.
So we didn't embarrass ourselves. It wasn't that kind of a game.
Well,
which
the
was
offense
good.
the offense was able to produce some points, and that's the key thing. Although I was concerned about quarterback play, Riker Fife was able to put some good passing plays together. It's just that they weren't able to put enough of them. We would have a good play, and then we would have some plays that aren't so good. And so that's a bit of an issue. And that gets back to both execution and talent, right? So we've got areas we need to focus on with that. As I review this game, it just exposed to us the discrepancy between the talent that we have across the board at all positions on our team versus other teams who are top 25, top 15-ish type teams. I look at that Tennessee team and, obviously they have some issues with their receivers not being able to catch the football. But if they can get that rectified, they have some talent there and some defensive players that were outstanding will probably be playing on Sunday. So they certainly showed us what a team with a little bit superior talent can do. But we need to be able to do that and then take advantage of some superior coaching. Because one of the things, we came out in the second half and we closed the gap a little bit. We did get it to where it was close within 7 points. And that's kind of what we've seen all year with our coaches. So there's a lot of good things to see about our coaches, but it's clear that they still have some work to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in looking at the season overall, it's hard to not look at the back half of the season as a little bit of a disappointment, given that we got off to this strong 7-0 start. We had that big game against Oregon, which admittedly looks a little less big given how they collapsed after they played us.
Right.
But there was still a lot of positivity going to that Wisconsin game. We played them into overtime.
Right.
This hard-fought game.
Won.
Right. If we had won that, our season definitely would have turned out different for us. But, so it's tough to see us lose to Wisconsin and then get blown out by Ohio State, and then the disappointing loss with Iowa and losing Armstrong, to injury and all that. Definitely petered out. But I think this season did what Riley did a lot of what he needed to do in that. After the losing season last year, he really restored some confidence in the Nebraska fan base that he was the right choice.
Right.
And clearly, he's, like you say, he's got some good coaching in him. There are problems, certainly, but overall, his staff is very experienced. It's the recruiting area, I think, that we're most concerned about right now.
Right, exactly. And so as we move into the off season, the things for Nebraska that we're going to keep an eye on is what they can do to shore up the areas that are really obviously areas of weakness right now. and in just in general how they're able to communicate, the brand of Nebraska football between now and signing day. They did a really good job early in the season when we had the benefit of good weather and home football games to have a lot of visiting recruits, and we had some real positive momentum. But then as you started to struggle, with our current situation as a football program that's kind of a borderline top 25 type of program, you needed to win some of those key games. And had we won that Wisconsin game, that would have been as significant in terms of what it would have spoken to the nation in terms of our recruiting and our program's direction as it was important in terms of the Big Ten race for this particular year. And the fact that we continue to lose those kinds of games is a problem for us in terms of being able to get over that hump. But I think that Coach Riley and his staff, particularly the beyond the football staff, do a very good job. They seem to know what they're doing, and I think we just need to be patient with them to give them a chance to do that. And next year, of course, we have, for the first time, in all likelihood, a quarterback that is of the type of quarterback that Coach Riley would have chosen in his preference to perform as the starter. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic changes what the offense actually looks like in execution. I don't think we're going to see the plays be all that dramatically different, but how they run them, the frequency with which they run them, all those kinds of things is definitely going to look different.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's what's exciting. After we had Armstrong for 4 years and Martinez for 4 years before
Right.
that. So there's always some excitement. Whenever you got a new quarterback in there. Now they're gonna, whoever they choose, it's gonna be one of the young guys, most likely. But you gotta hope that their talent, can push through some of their inexperience, and that they'll get better as the season goes along.
Right.
The tricky thing being that our season next year is tougher than our one from this past year
In terms of schedule.
right, because we play Ohio State and Penn State,
And we still get Wisconsin, who's going to be every
play
bit as talented.
Oregon at home at their home.
Right. So
Oregon.
it's going to be a year in which we have some significant challenges. But depending on how that quarterback position is filled and how some other key spots are filled, as I look at it looks like we have the ingredients to potentially have an okay, a decent, maybe even above average offensive line. This year our line was not above average; it was below average, and the bowl game probably diminished my confidence in that rather than increasing it. But I know what we've got in the wings. We were able to successfully redshirt, like 4 or 5 players along the offensive line. I think we've got some young defensive line talent that's going to help us secure that middle. But the defensive end position is a huge question mark going into next year, and I think linebacker position is a huge question mark. I think we have some secondary folks, both corners and safeties, that are we're gonna be okay there. So defensively, the big question marks are defensive ends and linebackers. And offensively, I think we have the basics for an offensive line that should be solid. We have a few good running backs. I don't think we have a dramatic difference maker type running back at this point. Mm-hmm. So we hope that maybe in recruiting we might find some guys that could do that. So my question is, what do you do about a position like defensive end, where frankly we need help now? And so I'm curious as to whether or not we try here in this last month before signing day to go find a JUCO or a fifth-year transfer that is a defensive end.
Mm-hmm. Even if it's a short-term fix, we need something.
We need somebody to fill the gap, because right now it's non-existent.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one last thing I wanted to say about this kind of transition into 2017 that made me, or gave me with a little bit of confidence, is that we fired our special teams coach,
right.
Which kind of proved to be a little point of disappointment this year, in that our punter, sometimes he was great, but then there was those near the end of the year, those 2 terrible ones where he kicked it really high up in the air, And we, even though we had DeMornay Pearsonell on kickoff returns, he never, I don't think, had a big kickoff return, on the level that he has in past years.
Right.
So it was disappointing to see our special teams struggle, even though we had a coach devoted specifically to that position.
Right.
And it seems like this new guy that they've got in there may be a good fit.
Well, and it's not so much a new guy. I mean, they've actually kind of reorganized the staff, and then the new hire has been put into the secondary. And so they've divided up responsibilities a little bit differently. And now the special teams area is going to be shared by the collective staff, with individual coaches taking on certain roles within that. But regardless, the results during the game were actually probably one of the few bright spots. Our punter had a great game against Tennessee. Punted very well, and we knew he was a good punter. I mean, coming in, we knew he had a leg. The issue was putting him because of the Sam Foltz passing that was so untimely and disappointing. They did a really good job of bringing him along. So now you can look to him and say, okay, he's got a position where maybe for the next 3 years he's going to be pretty darn good. And our field goal kicker is also an underclassman and will be back. So on the kicking game side of things, we should be pretty good. And DeMornay Pearsonell is back. So and hopefully another year removed from his severe injuries and fired up now going into his senior year to make an impact. Right?
Yes. Let's hope so. All right, so now we're going to transition to the more national side of our conversation. And just yesterday, we're recording this on January 1st, the first day of the new year, was the two semifinal games in the college football playoff. We're going to talk about Alabama-Washington first. That was a game that a lot of people kind of were wondering if it would be a blowout, because Alabama was heavily favored and all the news was about how Washington was this underdog. And Washington's defense really stepped up to the challenge, I think. They were stymieing Nick Saban's offense there for sure. It was just the problem was that their offense couldn't get anything done against Alabama's front four.
Right, exactly. I think the bottom line is that Washington's defense had a game plan that was pretty darn good, and they were able to kind of slow down that Alabama team for most of the game. Now, there were times when Scarborough, the great running back from Alabama, started to kind of take over the game there in the second half. But the bottom line is you don't give them a pick six, and that game has a different flavor pretty much throughout the game, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so not only did the offense not produce many points after a couple of good drives early, but they also gave up a pick six. Right. And put their defense in a very difficult situation.
Right. Well, and I would attribute some of that running back, kind of running away in the second half to just defense getting tired. You against a team as good as Alabama, you can't be 3-and-outing all the time because your defense is eventually going to wear out.
Right. Exactly. But as you said, I think Washington performed reasonably well in that game and showed why they were in that game and deserved to be there, that sort of thing. There's always that kind of question now in this day and age of the college football playoff. And I'm sure we're going to get into those kinds of conversations on future podcasts about the college football playoff and the whole setup and arrangement of that. But bottom line is that Washington maybe showed that there is a way that a team could beat Alabama, and it would be really a combination of things. You have to make their quarterback, that young Hurts fella, you got to make him a thrower. You've got to find a way to make sure that he doesn't hurt you. I mean, that guy broke their back, Washington's, a couple of times. They had them recall a series where Washington had kind of gained some momentum, and then they needed to hang on, keep them from scoring, and they weren't able to do it. They ended up marching down the field on them. At a very critical time. Had they 3-and-outed them right then, they wouldn't have been able to do it. And it was about Jalen Hurts breaking free to get a big run to help them do that. So you can't let that happen.
Yeah. Well, and then it was interesting how that game sort of turned into a reflection of what we would see in the Ohio State-Clemson game later that night, which a lot of people are expecting to be the more competitive game of the two, because Ohio State and Clemson seem to be more evenly matched. But that turned out to be more of the blowout than
Absolutely.
the previous game,
Absolutely.
to everyone's shock, I think.
Right. Well, and Ohio State just never was able to get untracked offensively. I think initially Ohio State's defense, was engaged and capable of making that an interesting football game, but Ohio State's offense was just so incapable of finishing the deal. And some of it was they had opportunities and they kept blowing it. And I feel bad for the field goal kicker, of course, who missed some early opportunities there that may very well have changed the whole complexion of that game had they been able to get some stuff on the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because was one of those off like an interception from Clemson?
Right. Correct.
Yeah, so they had opportunities, but they weren't able to capitalize on them, And those 2 missed field goals right at the beginning of the game, I thought, those, it sucked. They're going to regret that they didn't get at least one of those,
Right.
early on. But I thought, they'd be able to,
Get the ship right.
yeah, well, at least stay competitive.
Right.
As it turns out, those were their 2 best scoring opportunities of the whole game.
Exactly. And so J.T. Barrett's weakness as a thrower, as a passer, kind of was exposed with that. And the fact that they really don't have, they being Ohio State, do not have, a huge group of wide receivers that are able to create their own opportunities. The Samuels fella is awesome, but outside of that, they have some young talent that still needs to grow. The good news for Ohio State, of course, coming out of this is they're a team that's loaded with youth and is going to be back. And it sounds like from even the early returns already just today here on January 1st that some kids who were maybe at least of concern that they might leave early are choosing to stay. And if that trend continues with the other players that might be in that same boat for Ohio State, I think the future is going to be very bright for Ohio State.
Now, do you think some of that was just because this is the last time that the NFL scouts, are seeing them play on the field, and to see them look so, look so bad? Do you think that was a part of it?
Oh, I would say it's not. That sounds fairly myopic and selfish. I think that it's more about I don't want my last game in the Ohio State uniform to be a 31-0 whooping, right? And so some of these guys are like, I got some unfinished business here, and I'm going to do it. And it's about the team and about Ohio State University, not so much about them being concerned about their position in the draft. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because if they were going to be number 1 type draft picks, they probably would still go, right?
Right.
But for the most part, I think you're going to see those guys stay because they know they can get better and probably improve their stock and their position with another good season.
Yep. And then transitioning into the now upcoming national championship game between Alabama and Clemson. Clemson in that Ohio State game, I think, proved that they can be a challenger to Alabama. Some people were doubting that, saying Clemson was down from what they were before, and last year they still lost to Alabama. But Deshaun Watson really lit it up against Ohio State for sure, and clearly their defensive coordinator had a frankly brilliant game plan, ready to go. And you were talking about how using an adjusted version of that might be smart for Ohio State to try to, force their...
For Clemson, you mean?
Yeah, I'm
Clemson,
sorry.
yep.
For Clemson to force Alabama's quarterback to pass.
Right. I mean, Clemson's defensive scheme certainly kind of choked J.T. Barrett, right? And kept him fairly bottled up in terms of inside the pocket and when they were trying to throw the football. And the key was Clemson's offense was able to get them behind. And so the question would be, can Deshaun Watson and Clemson's offense have enough success against that great Alabama defense to be able to move the football, get some points, kind of maybe get Alabama a little bit behind the 8 ball, and then as a result put their quarterback in a position where they have to throw it a little bit. And if they did that, good things could happen for Clemson. If they're unable to do that, however, then that Jalen Hurts will hurt them. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the big question, as it was with the West Washington game. Alabama's defense is their best weapon right now.
Right.
And so what can Deshaun Watson do against them. And the fact that Deshaun Watson is this athletic quarterback, maybe that gives them more of a shot in that, like, when things break down and those linemen are charging in, but everything's spread out, he can slip past one of them and get, 8 yards instead of a sack.
Exactly. Yeah, it's more. I mean, Deshaun Watson obviously is going to have a great game, but more than that, they're going to have a great game out of some of their wide receivers, and their running backs are going to have to be efficient, meaning that they're going to have to take advantage of every opportunity and maximize, the yards that are available to them, knowing that they're playing a great defense. Can't get frustrated. They're going to encounter some negative plays because Alabama's just that good. And that's what they would have to do to win. Now, on Alabama's side, I think their formula is pretty well established. They know exactly what they need to do. They know who they are, and they're going to line up and try to run the football on you. They're going to throw the football a little bit more than they have historically because they've got this young, talented quarterback and they've got some good receivers, but that's not their strength. Their strength is running the football and using the talents of that multi-threat quarterback to make it very difficult for a defense to, contain their offense.
Mm-hmm.
Then their defense always gives them 7 points every game.
Yeah, what was it? 11 touchdowns from the defense.
Yep.
That was like the record, or their number one, I think, for this year. I don't think it's an all-time record or anything. But another point of discussion on this is this uninteresting? Having a rematch of the exact same two teams as last year. Mm-hmm. Alabama's won. Clemson's
reverse. Was it reverse last year as far as ranking? I think it might have been reversed. I think Clemson was ranked number one.
You're right, because Alabama had one loss last year.
Exactly.
Okay. So it is a little different.
But the same two teams, a lot of the same players, especially for Clemson. Clemson had a lot of returning starters. Now, the reality is that Clemson kind of has underperformed this year relative to their expectations. Obviously, they still played very well and weren't terrible at any point, but maybe weren't as dominant on a lot of games as people expected them to be. But then they put together this great game, and even their coach admitted was the best game they'd played all year. So the question becomes, can they put back-to-back 2 games together where they're playing at that high level? Mm-hmm. Because they certainly have the talent. They have some talent on defense that's really outstanding, and they obviously have a great quarterback in Deshaun Watson and some good running backs and receivers.
Right.
So they have some talent to make some things happen. And can their coaching staff out-coach the great Nick Saban?
Yes.
That's what's going to have to happen here a little bit. I mean, they don't have to play perfectly, but they have to seize their opportunities. So often teams feel like they have this pressure to play perfectly, and as soon as the first negative thing happens, it kind of loses their focus and they spiral downward against Alabama. And you can't feel that way. Alabama's going to make mistakes. Alabama struggled at times against Washington's defense. They really did. And so if Clemson can do that same thing and come up with a game plan that contains the quarterback, that's the one thing that Washington wasn't able to do consistently, was contain that darn quarterback. Mm-hmm. And so that's the key to the national championship game, in my opinion, for Clemson to achieve a win. The Alabama strategy is, I think, much more straightforward, and everybody knows what they're going to try to do.
Right. Or, well, I don't know. It would be interesting, I guess, if Saban, probably doing his traditional thing, he wouldn't change his whole game plan or anything. But I bet you he's got a trick or two up his sleeve, because in that game last year, they were throwing out all the stops.
Onside kick was one of the biggest plays of the whole game.
Yeah. Well, and that's another interesting factor, I think, to it is Clemson's sort of mindset going into it, and that they're the underdog and they lost last year.
Right.
So is the coach able to spin that and get the players into this? We're focused. We want to win because it's the national championship, and B, we want to win because we want to redeem ourselves. Right. Or does that turn into like you say, they play a little tight because they know they lost these guys last year and they're a little.
I'm gonna give Dabo Swinney some credit here and say that I think he does a pretty good job of getting his kids to play, the best they can and not get worried about the situation. Just play and have fun and enjoy the experience. And so I'm gonna expect that from him again this week. And that they should come and play well, just like last year. They played well. In fact, in many ways, you might argue they outplayed Alabama last year. Lost because Alabama made some key plays in some very critical situations that led ultimately to them winning the football game.
Oh yeah, well, and I was watching that game in a bar last year, and it was one of the most fun championship games I've ever seen. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So if
Very
we can get
entertaining.
something on the equal entertainment level to that as last year, I'll be happy.
Right. Well, and that's what gets
sure.
back to what you just said at the beginning of this segment, which is, are people going to watch? And I think that there's probably it's fair to say that there will be fewer people interested in watching that game that are not college football fans. The average sports fan maybe won't be as enamored with this matchup because it's a little too common, a little too been there, done that, right?
Right.
And Alabama has won so many games. It's like the sport's getting boring because everybody knows who's going to win. It's going to be Alabama, right? So what I would love to see is for the sport of college football, it would be very, very good, very refreshing for Clemson to win that game. So I'm a Clemson fan for this week.
Oh yeah, me too. Go Tigers. All right, very good. So I think this wraps up this episode of College Football Throwdown. I think it's safe to say that we'll be back sometime later in January to talk about the results of that national championship game and get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty details of the off-season for Nebraska and those sorts of things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we also hope in some future broadcasts, now that we're going to be doing this again with some regularity, is to talk about the sport of college football and to dive into some of the things that we think need to change for the sport to continue to enjoy success without spiraling in negative fashions, and to be critical, if you will, of this whole college playoff process and where has it been a success and where might it need to be changed to make it better.
Yeah.
And I won't be afraid to talk about the media that covers the sport as well.
Yeah, your favorite topic.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think we can maybe in a future podcast get into something that's kind of a hot topic at the moment, which is, do the bowl games matter with with the general attitude towards them and these players who are choosing not to play in the games, for the purposes of their NFL careers and things of that nature. So,
and that's going to be a bigger long-term issue. And then there's another issue out there that we probably should talk about before next fall, which has to do with the health of the sport at the younger levels. We're seeing significant, at the high school level and even below that. We're seeing significant change in how football is viewed, and I think it's urgent. It's absolutely critical that we that the sport find some solutions that they can begin to implement with regard to the whole concussion concern, because it is making it very easy for parents to opt out of the sport for their kid, with the justification being that the fear of concussion injury for their children, which is totally legitimate at this point. And I think that the sport, for its success long term, needs to address that, whether it's changes in rules, changes in equipment, or both.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Alrighty then. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode of College Football Throwdown. You can find us on our main website is Podomatic, but you can also find us on iTunes. That's the main place, probably best place to subscribe to us. We're College Football Throwdown on there. And you can email us as well, huskerpete13@gmail.com, and all that good stuff. We always love hearing from you guys. So thank you very much for listening to this episode of College Football Throwdown, and we will be back next time. So see you later.
Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.